Four dead bodies of women identified as prostitutes were found in a drainage ditch filled with shallow water on November 20, 2006, behind the Golden Key Motel on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township, situated on the outskirts of Atlantic City, New Jersey. All of them were placed face down in a row, facing east, about 60 feet apart from each other. They were clothed except for having their shoes and socks removed. Though two of the bodies were weeks old and so badly decomposed, a cause of death could not be determined. Roberts was found to be asphyxiated and Raffo was strangled with either a cord or a rope. The others were believed to have been strangled to death as well. 41-year-old repairman Terry Olson, who was being allowed to stay for free at the Golden Key Motel in exchange for repairs when the murders took place, was implicated by his girlfriend as the killer. They were reportedly having a domestic dispute at the time. In Olson's room, investigators found cameras set up and images of his girlfriend's teenage daughter undressing. There have been no DNA matches to connect Olson with the crimes, and he was never named as a suspect. A $25,000 reward was put up, but the reward still goes unclaimed.
In Edgecombe County, 10 women have vanished since 2005, with 9 since been found murdered. With decomposing bodies of Rocky Mount women being found naked and scattered in fields across 3 counties over 7 years, these grisly crimes have shined a national spotlight on Rocky Mount. All the remains were found near the Seven Bridges Road, which snakes northeast from Rocky Mount into rural Edgecombe County. A man named Antoine Pittman has been convicted of one of these murders, and some do suspect him of being the Seven Bridges killer. But the majority consensus is that it's not him. One of the victims, Roberta Williams, could be traced back to 2008, as it has been the last time Williams was seen alive. Her remains were discovered in 2010, off Seven Bridges Road, between Battleboro and Whitakers. In January 2011, more human remains were found by a hunter in Edgecombe County, whereby this victim could be number 9. The remains have been identified in January as 37-year-old Yolanda Lancaster, who was listed as missing. The first victim found was Melody Wiggins, 29, back in 2005. In 2007, Jackie Thorpe, 35, was found nude in a pile of trash. 2008, the body of Ernestine Battle, 50, was found in a wooded area. In June 2009, a farmer found the skeleton of Jarnice Latanya Hargrove, 31, also in a wooded spot.
In 1975, 5 women and girls were killed by a man in Dade County, Florida. The killer would deflate his victims' tires while they were gone and then conveniently offer assistance, gaining his victims' trust, before kidnapping them. One of the women, a 23-year-old named Barbara Stevens, was kidnapped from the mall and stabbed to death using this trick. The killer was also associated with the murder of 2 14-year-old schoolgirls. The police at the time reported similarities to murders elsewhere in the country and detectives in Florida, Utah, and California developed a theory that one man may have been responsible for 33 deaths throughout the U.S. Some of the murders were eventually confessed to by Ted Bundy, but the deaths in Florida remain unsolved. According to police, the killer is likely very intelligent, with an above-average IQ, and above-average strength and prowess. The method of killing has been a combination of shooting, stabbing with an ice pick, and blunt force trauma from hammer blows. 3 of the 4 victims could not immediately be identified due to severe disfiguration.
Between April 1971 and September 1972, Washington, D.C. was terrorized by a serial killer who is to this day only known as the Freeway Phantom. While at large, the Freeway Phantom brutally raped and murdered 6 girls, between the ages of 10 to 18, all of whom were African American. This boogeyman would become known as the D.C. region's first profiled serial killer, and their crimes continue to haunt investigators and loved ones close to half a century later. Common practice at the time was that case files at MPDC detective divisions were retained in files maintained by the detectives assigned to the case. As a result, the Freeway Phantom case files have been lost, along with the associated notes, and all investigators assigned as primary or task force have either long retired, or are deceased. With current evidence and any information of the case from when it happened, no leads produce sufficient evidence for prosecution. This case is open as a cold case in the MPDC Homicide Division. Right around the time of the murders, the police also had other things on their minds. During the span of the killings, the Watergate scandal and subsequent action and investigations were in full swing. As Watergate created national outcry and media attention, the Freeway Phantom murders were forced into the background, attracting little interest from the public outside of the areas the girls had lived.
On January 20, 1947, in a deserted factory lot on the Baustrasse, today the Hinrichsenstrasse, the body of a young woman, about 18 to 20 years old, was found by playing children. A millimeter-wide trace of drying on the neck of the deceased indicated that she had been strangled with a string. That same month, the body of an unclothed man aged between 65 and 70 was found by scrap collectors. Forensic scientists suspected that the time of death was between January 23 and 25. In that February, in the elevator shaft of a bombed-out house of a former mattress factory on Billstrasse, near Billikenau, the strangled body of a 6-year-old naked girl was found. That same month, the final victim's body was located, a woman, about 30 to 35 years old, naked and also strangled. The identities of the victims were never discovered. The Hamburg police warned the population to be wary of strangers approaching them in homeless shelters and waiting rooms, and that driving with a personal driver was dangerous. In the statistics from 1946 to 1964, 268 out of a total 320 murder cases were investigated by the Hamburg police, but the case of Rubble murderer was not among them. The investigation files are still available in the Hamburg State Archives.
Between 1959 and 1965 a total of 8 women were found murdered in the borough and in neighboring Chiswick and Brentford. The sex worker slaying was dubbed the Hammersmith nude murders because each victim was found naked except for stockings and dumped in areas around London or in the River Thames. The imaginative nickname given to the unknown serial killer was Jack the Stripper. It stumped police officers investigating the case, led by Chief Superintendent John Dew Rose, who interviewed almost 7,000 suspects in a desperate bid to catch the culprit. The finger of suspicion for the murders was pointed firmly at security guard Mungo Ireland, who worked on the Heron Trading Estate, in Ealing, where final victim Bridget O'Hara was found in 1965. Former British boxing heavyweight champion Freddie Mills has also been named as a potential suspect for the horrific crimes, but no one was ever charged with the offences. Ireland committed suicide in March 1965 under the pressure of suspicion while Mills was shot in the head in his car in July 1965, and the death of both suspects led police to close the book on the case. Despite intense media interest and one of the biggest manhunts in Scotland Yard's history, the case is unsolved. All forensic evidence gathered at the time is believed to have been destroyed or lost.
Dozens of Canadian women and girls, most of them Indigenous, have disappeared or been murdered near Highway 16, a remote ribbon of asphalt that bisects British Columbia and snakes past thick forests, logging towns and impoverished Indian reserves on its way to the Pacific Ocean. So many women and girls have vanished or turned up dead along one stretch of the road that residents call it the Highway of Tears. Explanations for this include systemic racism, poverty, drugs, violence, disconnection with traditional culture and disruption of the family unit through the foster care system and residential schools. Poverty in particular leads to low rates of car ownership and mobility, thus hitchhiking is often the only way for many to travel vast distances to see family or go to work, school, or seek medical treatment. Another factor leading to abductions and murders is that the area is largely isolated and remote, with soft soil in many areas and carnivorous scavengers to carry away human remains. These factors precipitate violent attacks as perpetrators feel a sense of impunity, privacy, and the ability to easily carry out their crimes and hide evidence. Accounts vary as to the exact number of victims. According to the RCMP Project EPANA list, the number of victims is less than 18. Aboriginal organizations estimate that the number of missing and murdered women ranges above 40.
The Honolulu Strangler, otherwise referred to as the Honolulu Rapist, was Hawaii's first known serial killer who is responsible for the murder of 5 women between 1985 and 1986, making them the most prolific serial killer in Honolulu's history. Very few suspects have been named, and investigators have no new leads to work with. The killer's profile was stated to be that of an opportunist who attacked women who were vulnerable, such as at bus stops, and not one who stalks his victims. He likely lives or works in the area of the attacks, being Waipahu or Sand Island. The first victim was Vicky Gale Purdy, who was found with her hands bound behind her back, had been raped, and died from being strangled. All other women were found and killed in the same way. Following the discovery of the last victim's body, police arrested the informant on May 9 as the primary suspect. The suspect's ex-wife and girlfriend described him as a smooth talker. They also provided a potentially incriminating fetish clue, as both recalled engaging in bondage activity, allowing him to tie them up and have sex with their hands bound behind their back. The suspect was interrogated and, despite failing a polygraph test, was eventually released.
Women, ages ranging from 14 to 71, were each found gagged and murdered over a 4-year and 7-month period in the rural city of Waesong in Gyeonggi Province. The case is infamous within Korea for being the first truly identifiable string of murders with a modus operandi. Police officers involved spent 2 million man-days on the case. The total number of suspects also grew to enormous numbers, eventually ending with a total count of 21,280 individuals. Victims of the serial murders were all strangled to death with their own clothes, such as pantyhose or socks. There was also evidence of forced sexual abuse, which sent shockwaves through the public. The evidence compiled led to a description of a man in his 20s weighing between 165 and 170 pounds and having the blood type be based on forensic testimony. In Korea, the statute of limitations for murder is 15 years, and it ran out on the case on April 2, 2006. However, the police records are still kept because of the significance of the case. In 2004, a female college student was murdered, sparking new interest in the Waesong serial murders, though the case also remains unsolved.